Welcome back on deynonmod. Today I want to propose you a video about
the assembly, study and personalization about the Wight Lord Barrow King, released in April 2025 with the army set Deathrattle Soulblight Gravelords 2025. Remembering that if you are interested about this army set unboxing, you can find the link in the description. And about the model itself, we can find that it's exactly the same that you can find separate after it. Simply I had this box that it's really quite awesome, so I wanted to show off about it. So now we go to see about the instruction to see what we can gain from such set that it's amazing, and then preparing the model itself. So let's start. Let's start to analyze the instruction, and here we can start to see that the horse is separate from the basing. This is quite important because it means that we can change the basing, or we can eventually clone the basing itself, because it's an amazing shiny feature even by itself, so it's really quite nice. Moreover, another thing to notice is that the base is 80mm ones, as for the Lich Gravelords. So this it means that it's the size of the base that characterizes the model, that it's in this case the hero, the leader. So it means that, for example, you could use this mod as a champion for the Barrow Knight simply using another base. It's really quite intriguing that way. And if you go to see about the horse itself, you can find that first it's missing the head, because the head is one, and we see quite soon, that characterizes a Barrow King or a Wight Lord. Moreover, you can see that the legs are in common for both the model, but are separate from the horse itself. So it means that eventually we can change the rider. So we can use the basing and the horse itself, and the rider that can be up to us. So a skeleton horse that it's quite amazing. Then if we flip, we can find the difference of the Barrow King and the Wight Lord. We can find so that the head of the horse is different. Remember that the legs are in common, but what change is the upper part of the model. Upper part that it's both different, so eventually we can prepare and switch from each other, so that we have the part complete of the upper part, that it's in this case having the weapon on the left and the shield on the right for the Barrow King, and instead the opposite for the Wight Lord, so that it has the sword on the right hand and the shield on the left. Eventually we can also play cutting off the pieces and making it's really quite intriguing in some way. So here it has quite a lot of potential, because it means also that eventually we can also play, because we can make that we can change the head, so to have the head of the Wight Lord, because as you can see the Wight Lord has that the breeders are separate from the model itself, and make that so we can magnetize, making a little conversion of the part of the shield for the Wight Lord, so that makes that it has the ability to be put and changed. So simply change the upper part of the model, we can make that it's a Wight Lord or Barrow King taking the same, or eventually we can clone the legs of the model and so make two different models at all, or again combine, cutting off part of what remains from the sprue or the Barrow Guard and gain a completely perfect Barrow King on foot. It's really quite intriguing, it has really quite a lot of potential. It's up to you decide what you want, what you can gain, because it has really tons of potential. This it's a model that you can then personalize, because you have tons of accessories that you could add or not, and so on. So it's a really great base. Moreover, what remains about such model, even if you don't use, as I said, as magnetize or a Barrow King, you could use for apply to other conversion and so on. So it has quite a lot of things that could be really quite amazing one. I quite love. So now we go to see about instead the sprue and prepare the models. There are some notes about the basing. First of all, when you reach such step about assembling the base, I suggest you to make a clone if you want, or eventually start to paint, because the problem is if you add these details, because otherwise they cover a bit of the parts, and more if you are going to clone these, part about these little skeletons. Anyway, you could do this adding, for example, from the set, for example, the old skeletons, because it's really quite nice, because it has the armor, it has eventually the shield, you have technically the head without any problem, and also the spear, it's a problem, because it's really quite nice, but it would be problematic if you want to clone, because it's really coming out. Okay, it's not quite good in such a way. Still, it's an amazing piece. But remember that eventually you can add also other pieces about tombstone, little ones, or other models that are like these skeletons, so you can add on the base. And about the base itself, if you go to compare, we can find that there are not too much parts that are exposed, so you can think about adding some snow valley, for example, or other details to make it really more plain, more suited about this, because otherwise if you paint directly on the base it's not the best. Still, it has really quite a lot of potential, I quite like, and it's really something that add volume and add characteristic, really quite themed as basing. I quite appreciate this one, so quite amazing. As usual, I suggest you, after that you made the study of the theoretical part with destruction, to make a practical study of the subassembly. So to know, after that you planned the part of how to convert and so on, also to study eventual problem about the painting and how the conversion eventually could be put. So for example, about the front legs of the horses, here are separated. So if you see, you can find that they have a hole here and a little part here that goes to combined. So there's not a problem about making a misshape so that the right and left can be switched. So it's really quite important. And moreover, study about, for example, these tissues ones, because if you see, we can see that there are some that are covered partially by the bones. So here we have to understand if once that we can combine everything together, there are pieces that could be still seeable but problematic to reach after that you have assembled everything. And here it's really quite important to do, because you can save quite a lot of effort afterward, because maybe you can paint something, then could be sub-assembly, and then eventually refine, but saving quite a lot of time of painting, because eventually there is again something that could be seen but not good to reach eventually once that everything is assembled. Eventually we can also study how we can change the position of the part here of the convertible to for the head and so on. So it's really something that it's really quite simple, but it's one of the steps that it's better to do to simplify and make it better going on. And now let's talk about the legs. So here we take the horse, and we can find that on the saddle there are the bones here that are something that you have to remember, because eventually you have to cut off. And to see about the option to put the legs and removed, we can find that there is this piece here that combine with this little one. So eventually we have to cut off this little thing if we want to slide off. But we should also cut off the part of the bone here that eventually it's little visible. So in one it's not a problem. But if we move on the other side, we can find that here anyway it's a little seeable, as you can see, the bone. So you have to decide if cut and glue on the back of the leg here, otherwise it will be not so great to see such piece that it's missing something. Really, it's small, but it's something that is seeable. Eventually, if you want to glue, remember eventually to paint this before, otherwise it will be a problem to reach. Okay, it's one of the reasons because I say that it's better to plan about such things. Moreover, about such legs, we have also to understand that we have two different options that we can combine to put accessories. So for example, we have this one that goes here, and here it's for the Wight King, for example, and this one for the Wight Lord. But we have also for the other side the options, so eventually we had to decide which one of these could be useful. So we could eventually make that it has a double sword for each of this side, or simply this one, so mix a bit the one that are for the Wight King and Wight Lord. So it's not bad, but you have to plan a bit about what you can gain, because it's something that you have to decide. Little things really, but there are things that you have to think about, because if you want to simply glue, it's not a problem, because eventually it's really quite simple. At the same time, anyway, you can see that it could be problematic if you want to remove the part about the rider for the legs. But remember that we have also about the upper part here. So here we can eventually magnetize under here and here together. So eventually we can change the upper part without any problem. So here one, that is the Wight King, and here the other part about the Wight Lord. So as you can see, it's really quite simple because it's a simple point of contact that it's easy to magnetize if you want to simply change the upper part and change so that the same model could be a Wight King or a Wight Lord. It's up to you to decide how you want to proceed. And now let's talk about the upper part of the rider. So here we can see that, for example, if we want to take the Wight King one, we have this detail that goes without any problem. But since let's suggest to paint them separately, at least the arm under it, otherwise it would be quite problematic to reach the pieces, because it's really quite okay. And about the head itself, here we have 3 pieces: the head, the crown, and this part. So eventually you could also try to use like this without this upper part and using only with the crown. It could be an option eventually. And pay attention when you take off this from the sprue, because it's really quite delicate. It was really hard not to break everything. And one other thing that we can see instead about the Wight Lord is that there is some pieces that are visible that anyway are detached, even if you see. So eventually you can think to paint the bones here that you can see about these shoulders, that otherwise would be problematic to reach. Also this part, you can see that these bones, you see them, but they are not really great to reach after that you assemble everything. So eventually think about painting them before. And one thing that is interesting, it's about the heads, because we can remove the heads of the Wight Lord and Wight King and simply switch with the other one. So eventually it could be done also that it's make that you can use in such a way that one head could be used for the Wight Lord and then change or so on. So it's quite intriguing. It's an option to have eventually to build the mod as it is and switch as you want. Sincerely, you could also change in the way that you prefer, maybe to have the Wight King with this head to be a Wight Lord, so, or vice versa, to have the weaponry of the Wight Lord that have the head of the Wight King. So here it's really quite easy to choose, because you could simply decide that you want a mod as it is on the part, so that you can glue everything, and having the head that is switched as you prefer. It's really something that you have to decide how you want to personalize, because it has really a lot of different combinations, and it's really not bad. But you have also to pay attention about the steps about painting again, because for example, I told you about the front part of this, but you have also to pay attention about the back part of it, because we had this mantle that we can remove and we can see underneath. So eventually you can paint before, then add the mantle, or paint the mantle separately and add. And almost the same about here, because you had this tissue that it's nice but problematic to paint eventually. So here it's the study that it give you quite a lot of options once that you decide. And sincerely, it's not bad. It has really quite a lot of potential. I quite appreciate such things. Before I told you that it's good to combine the theoretical part with the practical one. And here it's an example, because in a previous passage I told you that here these have these bones that it would be better to paint them separately, so that when you assemble it's not problematic to reach. But when we combine the last pieces on this model, we can find that they are hidden. Eventually there is a little tip here that it's anyway quite reachable, so it's not a problem. Same about the other of the arms. So again, it's hidden. You have still something to remember about the painting of the armor underneath, so you have to pay attention about this detail. But it's really quite nice. About the horse itself, remember that you have this with the bridles that are by themselves, and it's something that I quite appreciate about such thing. And moreover, about this model, I had something that was quite intriguing about these pieces here, and I remember where I see them. It's the black coach here. Okay, it's really an old model that could make really quite interesting, because as you can see, there are tons about such option in such way. So okay, it's nice. It's an old tip eventually, so not bad at all as things that you could eventually apply for the Wight Lord. Remember, you can personalize as you want, it's simply some tips to remember. We had to make also some talk about the Wight King. Here had the beetles that have at the end of them the hand of the one hand here of the arm that goes with the shield. That should be quite close, okay? It's a sort of protective way. Okay, but sincerely I cut off the hand from the beetles and put like this so that I can put in different ways the shield and so on, so having a more personalized way, but you have to pay attention about if you need. Eventually you could also use the other hand for the horse, so that have the beetles that are put in different ways, so that you can gain quite a lot, or exchange the breeders, because as you see they're really quite similar ones, okay, in different position, but could be adapted in some ways, so it's quite tricky. Eventually you can cut off simply the bottom part here, so that you can reuse this part and adjust so that you have the cutoff of the hand from the breeders here and the free breeders, even using the head of the other models. Here the head, it's quite intriguing because it recalls the one from the Barrow Knight. Okay, a bit bigger with this crest, but it's really quite nice. I quite appreciate this. So as I said, you can really personalize as you want, quite intriguing. I quite like what you can gain from such a model. It's really quite amazing. There are also little bits that could be used to personalize even more the model, okay? It's that you decide if to use or not, but sincerely I find them too much, because the model is yet rich of details, so I prefer to use this for other things. Still, I quite appreciate that there are, because it means that anyway I can personalize other models with such options, so not bad. To personalize my Wight King, for example, I'll change the part about the hand. So instead of cutting off this one that is with the beetles, I'll take off one of the swords that come from or the old skeletons ones, or one of the swords that I haven't used about the Barrow Guard, so that it could be nice. It's a way to have both weapons on the arms and having the shield too. And I also modify about this weapon, that it's amazing, adding a bit of longer weapon underneath, so that I can have a sort of lance, and it's becoming more a sort of halberd lance, so it's quite tricky. I quite like such options available, because you can personalize doing simple things. To personalize even more about the basic, we can use a trick, and okay, here we can see the original added part of skeleton that are inside, but eventually we can add, for example, all the set of skeletons that we can make that seem like it's resurrecting a sort of legion. It's accompanied by the skeleton warriors and so on. It's really quite intriguing. And this option, it's not something new, because we've seen something similar with this. The base about such miniature, it's the one of Harry the Hammer that I converted to use with my vampires. And here I really quite love about such one. It's really quite amazing. So here we can see that we can really gain quite a lot, and eventually we can use such idea to apply about these new ones. So it's up to you to decide how much you want to make this I can say skeleton, so with a lot of bones, but it's an intriguing option, I think. And here's some suggestions about how to use the remaining body that you have of the Wight King or Wight Lord. So I said that you can use eventually using what remain about the Barrow Guard. So here it's one of the body for the champion, and here you can cut off the part of the armor, simply fill the part about here for the back, because you can see that it's missing part of the mantle. And here it's quite simple, because as you can see it's perfect combined. A little effort, but really quite intriguing and nice. And otherwise, another option is to use something that I create as modifying one of my champions for the Warhammer Fantasy Battles. This was one of my Black Knight when I wanted to convert them, and I made it as a Centaurus, my champion for the one of the Black Knights. So eventually you can use this. It's a body that comes from the set of the Camry one, but it's the old skeleton of horses, and really could be quite nice combined, so really quite intriguing. Obviously you have to refine that, but it's an option that can create a particular model, and really it's a way to create also an intriguing Cavalier, because here doing so you can have quite an intriguing other one. You only need some additional bases, for example some FDF bases or some plastic ones of the right side, and you can create or another eventually Barrow Knight or eventually a new Wight King or Wight Lord, and this it's a Centaur's way. So I quite appreciate and quite like about such thing, because I think that it's really quite really intriguing to play with. And here my final thought before starting to paint, because I decided to make some subassembly and paint successfully. So I start with preparing the base here, so that I can reach everything, because then I add the other things that are going here, and it will cover part of the model reachable. And then I add a bit of snow valley on the base here, so that I can cover everything that is exposed, because in such a way I'm prepared when I add the other pieces that I show you that could personalize, because eventually there will be pieces that will be out and so on, and then I can simply add another bit of snow valley to adjust. So at the end the base is ready, and then I can decide based on how it's the rider itself. So it's really quite nice in such a way. Then about the breastplate of the rider, I added on the weapon this part of the spear that it comes from the warrior set of the one skeletons. The only problem was to make them align, but it's not quite a problem, only a bit of patience. And I'll make that these two pieces are separate painted, because otherwise there are pieces that, as I said, that are not able to reach, and it's not worth, okay? It's simply better to do in such a way, in my opinion. Then about the head itself, I paint this separately, and I make so that I can reach the face of the model, the skull, and I cut off the upper part of this part, that make that so it's really better. I don't like this part, so I cut off. Obviously there will be also the part about the crown that will be separate, so that it's quite easier to paint. So it's something that I had to do step by step, these parts. Another thing it's about the hand and the shield. Here I prepared and I taken this from one of the set of the skeleton warriors, the same as this lance. So step by step I prepared. About the legs, you have only to be patient. One thing is important about the head of the skeletons, cause or the horse, because here we can find that if you put it's really quite amazing, but there are pieces that are really seeable, at the same time will be problematic to reach, so I prefer to paint these separate. And about the breeders, I use the ones that come from the set. Here it's from the Wight King, the head horse here, and the breeders I use the ones that come from the set of the Wight Lord. If you have problem about combine, it's cause here you have this little piece here that you have to cut off, this little square, so that you can really put them together without any problem. And another thing, if you needed to make really that you don't have the option, you see that you have these parts that are to combined. Okay, if you have a problem, cut off this part, because eventually you can also switch these breeders with also for the other head. So eventually if you want to recycle also the other head, you have the options. So it's something that you have to think about. I'll paint also separately the head, the legs here for the horse, because it's much better, because once that I painted the head here of the horse itself, I will be able to make them together and then paint everything, and this part will be problematic to reach otherwise if I put the legs of the horse. Instead I can put them after, so without any problem, and then refine them a bit. So it's something to save patient headaches and so on. So it's really quite simple, as you see, as planned, and then I have only to add, for example, the other pieces that I want, for example other models like the Barrow Guard that remain, ones that I just modified. So everything it's up to you decide how you to proceed. I do this because I save quite a lot of headache doing simply it, and I prefer in such way. So technically the model is complete. I only need to glue the horse to the base. The only thing that I don't like as it is now, it's about the fur on the back, because maybe a more bluish color will be fitting better, so maybe I'll change later. But this model, even if technically it's complete, I want to improve even more. So I want to add some Barrow Guard, and if you are curious why I have Barrow Guard left, I invite you to go to see about in the description about the video about the Barrow Guard themselves, and eventually also some other sprue that I showed you before, because I want to make it even more intriguing, because I want to put some of the Barrow Guard on the base so that it seems that it's marching with its elite guard. So to have a more complete diorama, I quite like the idea. So step by step I add something else, because anyway there are residual part of models, as you can see, that were original in the base, and I think that it would be even more intriguing to have this Avanci with a full base of Deathrattle ones. Really quite amazing one, I think. And so you had the final version about this model. The Barrow Guard were fitting, perfect fitting, and they are really something that once started, they make the model feeling even more perfect than before. I quite like. The only thing that I still think about changing, it's about the fur on the back. I thought about adding these pieces, but at the end the base is too full. Adding them will be shadowing something else. It will be really quite too much. So I'll use them for other projects, but still they are something that give me the idea about the Barrow Guard added and so on. So I'm really quite intrigued and amazed. What do you think about? Do you have some other idea about creating and personalize such model, or do you build it like in Destruction? I'm quite curious about. I want to make some comparison about this working on skeleton horse versus other undead chivalry that have, because I wanted to see how effective it is such one. I really quite like that this is modified in such a way, so we can move aside and compare it, for example, with one of my first modifying about the Ossebo Reapers. And here we can see that really you can personalize a lot. The base of 80mm give you a tons of options that are really quite amazing, so really nice. We can compare also to another mod about the Ossebo Reapers, that it's the Lich Cavalros standard one, and really you can find that the Lich Cavalros it's much bigger than the Wight King, but at the same time they occupy a similar volume, and you have a ton of fun about personalization, because you can really have what you want about this. It's something that I really quite appreciate. Then we can go to see about, for example, my working on Chalicotherium, that it's one of my models that I modified that I am quite proud about. About here we can see that the model at the end it's even smaller technically than the Chalicotherium itself, but it's not so different about the volume. What I had to do is about rebuild the base, because or I use the working on Chalicotherium as a, for example, Barrow Knight, a champion, so on, or I can create a enlarging of the base itself of this model and use a similar way to use about the Wight King, so have something in the surrounding that give you also more about, and I quite appreciate such options. I think that they are really quite awesome. But we can also compare this model with the Barrow Knight themselves, and we can see that the size at the same time it's not so different. So eventually we can change the one. We could change, for example, the upper part of the model of a Barrow Knight, maybe using what else remain from the Warlord and having so a different models that could be used with a different base to have something else. So you can really have quite a lot of fun. But we can also go to see about older models, for example, a old Camry Horseman. We can see that it's much smaller. Okay, it's not something that I painted, it's a used model that I bought and I still have to renew. Or maybe a Centaurus, old one, okay. A old Black Knight that I made, that I personalized at the time. It's really quite older one, and it was my personalization, so not the original Black Knight. We can find a original Black Knight, the previous one. We can find that here we can see some little change about, so not bad at all. We can compare it with a Death Rider here of the Ossebo Reaper, and again here what the change it's about the basing. Otherwise it's really quite compatible with the difference in size, or eventually with the Centaurus itself of the Ossebo Reapers. So you can really have tons of fun with such type of models. It's how you decide how you want to personalize, but what give you it's the option to have a lot of freedom. You can really have a lot of you can think about something and create. It's something that I quite appreciate. I love such model. I don't have the previous one about the Wight King on skeleton, also that it was quite nice, but never made me say, oh wow, had to have it. Yes, I liked, but never bought, and hope that maybe in the future I'll have for something, I don't know. Still, I like much more about this, and I love how I personalize such model eventually. Really quite intriguing option that you can gain from having these new ones. And so here we can see the Wight King on skeleton steel with the Barrow Knights. So we can have quite a lot of fun seeing how the theme it is, and it's amazing. I really quite love to see all of them together. And so here you can see all the Deathrattle army set built up and available, and I really quite love what we can have, because it gives you quite a lot of vibe of an entire army with the same style, and it's really fantastic. I quite love. Really, I hope that you like, because it's fantastic. Remember that you can find the links about all these different units in the description if you're interested about. So what do you think about such model? Because sincerely I think that it has quite a lot of potential. We've seen that I made simple modification, but I quite appreciate what at the end had. So really quite intriguing. Obviously it's up to you to decide, but I'm quite curious if you prefer this, the previous one, or you converted as I made for example with my Chalicotherium, some other models of this type. Because this is one type of options that I always appreciate. I like the Deathrattle theme, and so I always had really a weak spot about this type of things. Eventually write in the comment if you would have done something else, you would have preferred the previous one modified, you like more to have your one personalized, you have idea about new personalization, or you're going to create new models because you have. Because personally with the pieces that remained, I really think about creating something completely new again. So have tons of idea, and the only thing that I'm missing is have enough pieces that remain, or have to start construct something to have a final result, because I'm really having fun. So it's what mind. Anyway, from deynonmod it's everything. I invite you to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell so to receive notification about new video, to comment under here about this video, or if you want to suggest me new videos. So I hope to see you again to the next time.